so democracy in Africa is cultural in a sense. And if it's cultural, then there are type of countries where it's sustainable and it has solid foundation. You know, no one should worry about Senegal becoming a dictatorship. Nobody should worry about Benin or countries like Tanzania becoming a dictatorship, because democracy in these countries are cultural in a sense, are you know, originated from things that happened. What the first leaders of this country from 1945 to 1960 chose to do, which led to the outcome that we see today. You know, so despite, you know, violence that you can see like in some of the countries like Mali and Niger, I strongly believe, based on this study, that even in these countries, democracy has solid foundation. And this is a fantastic news for those who believe that democracy not only matters for political reasons, but democracy matters for economic reasons. And I'm going to show you in a second why democracy matters for economic reasons. Well, if you see the green, the green line shows economic performance in urban protest countries from 1960 to 2010, and economic performance in rural insurgency countries are in red, dotted line, from 1960 to 2010. You can see that in a very consistent way that, in fact, the urban protest countries outperform the rural rebellion countries. And that's fantastic news. It shows that, in fact, the economic performance that we've seen for the past 20 years is, in fact, a political dividend. It's a democratic dividend, the peace dividend. It's not just a pure economic phenomenon, it's a political phenomenon. It's a reward for the countries that became democratic, that on average are more stable and more peaceful. And that's fantastic, that's great. So for instance, Professor Diaye had mentioned that there is, you can see that, for instance, from 2008 to 2010, there is a decline in economic performance in the, he mentioned decline in economic performance in Africa. A deceleration, I should say, of economic performance across Africa. But in fact, you can see this is due to the rural insurgency countries, not to the urban protest countries. So those countries that are doing bad today, that are dragging African performance down, are the urban protest countries, like Central Africa. So, the rural rebellion countries. You know, so what matters, what shows is that, in fact, so long as democracy flourishes in Africa, so long as Africa remains peaceful and stable, then the growth performance that we have seen will continue. Okay? So now, and this is something that we don't put enough emphasis on. Okay? Now, I want to tell you that, I completely reject the idea that democracy is foreign to Africa. As I mentioned earlier, it originated from the 40s, Leopold Sedar Senghor and Gerrit Nyerere and Kwame Nkrumah, where in terms of institutional, in terms of culture, they are the one who set up the concept of democracy in Africa. So that's why I mentioned earlier that it's a cultural phenomenon. Okay, but it's not also I mean, we have a lost decade from 1960 to 1990, where you had a lot of coup d'etat, a lot of conflict and civil war all over Africa. And we have democratic reform from 1990. So I heard a lot of people saying that democracy has been imposed in Africa, that it's François Mitterrand who brought democracy here, that after the end of the Cold War, you know, the West decided that Africa is good enough for democracy now, let's get them start holding elections. So my personal experience and the experience of many of my friends show otherwise. I'm not sure if you recognize someone in that picture. So it was a picture of 4 students in mathematics at the National University of Benin in 1982. So we organized a protest movement against the government for democracy, and some of us were arrested, and those 4 were on the run. So that picture was taken at our hiding place somewhere in Cotonou. So as you can imagine, a thinner, a much younger version of me is on the far left, you know, and I have to wear those hats day and night as a way to make sure that people, you know, recognize who I was. So we were extremely promising, bright students, and we decided to give up all this to fight for democracy in the country. Now, after that was in 1982, when there was an amnesty and we all came back at the university in 1984, imagine what we did. We organized a much bigger protest. We organized a much bigger protest, and all of us were arrested. And I spent about 18 months in those cells somewhere in northern Benin. I mean, it's hell. I mean, that place was a real hell. That's where we stayed for 18 months before I escaped and went to Nigeria, and from Nigeria went to Cote d'Ivoire, Canada, later on to become a professor at Princeton University. So, and you know, the place on the right was the cell, what I used to call, it was usually called Democratic Kampuchea, you know, to show how bad it was. Kampuchea Democratic, what's called in French. In most African countries, elections are not opportunities to design effective development policies, to improve education, health, infrastructure provision. Elections tend to be dominated by clientelism, where state resources are used by politicians for short-term electoral gains, and voters' decisions are influenced by immediate material gain rather than long-term policy. So now, instead of simply just attacking politicians and say how corrupt they all are, how bad they all are, one of the things that I have been doing for the past maybe 15, 18 years or so is to think about solution to clientelism. Is there a way you can actually conduct, let me put it this way, conduct elections? Is there a way you can reform the electoral process or reform, you know, the governance in African countries to promote candidates that are issue-based candidates, and how can you improve, you know, let's say bureaucratic performance. Overall, how do you improve electoral governance and also, you know, a bureaucratic performance? So I came up with something that I call policy deliberation. We came up with the idea that what Africa needs today to promote good governance is using something which is very much part of our culture, which is town hall meeting, deliberation, as a way to increase the level of engagement of voters with politicians and voters between each other, I mean voters among themselves, so that we can sort of improve the quality of elections and also increase bureaucratic performance. So, and we designed and implemented a deliberative campaign strategies in Benin, and I tested the same methodology in the Philippines to show that it's something that not only works in Africa, but also can work elsewhere. And what we find is that when campaigns are based on deliberation, town hall meetings, it makes the platform of candidate more transparent. It allowed voters to customize the ideas that the politician is bringing to them and make it theirs, and also is allowed for better information sharing between those who attended the meeting. So what I'm proposing is one way to improve democratic performance in Africa, democratic governance in Africa, is to introduce better participation, better engagement with voters through town hall meetings. So, and as I mentioned earlier, it's something which is African, you know, from African tradition is, especially in terms of politics, is one of active participation, l'art à palabre, as people say in French. So it's something that we can modernize, we can sort of develop so that it's very much part of the way we do politics today. So I'm not going to go through the way I designed the study. I'm just going to show you, some pictures of town hall meetings, in Benin. That was done in the context of the 2006-2011 election. So basically what we do, we work with candidates. We actually get the top 3 candidates to conduct the study with us. You know, we get them to experiment what we are proposing in the context of of their campaign. So, and what we did, we randomly picked about 30 electoral districts, and within each district, we randomly picked 2 villages where we run town hall meetings. And then the places in the district where this kind of strategy was not run is called the control villages. So we have treatment villages where we run this kind of deliberative campaign strategy, and then the control where this was not run. And what happens is that, in this case, the candidate comes, introduces his platform for 15 minutes, and then we allow participants to talk for about an hour. And then after that, we get a couple of people to write down the summary of the meeting that we're going to transmit to the candidate for feedback. So this is a set of videos of the experiment that was run in 2006. So that was me in 2006 before the election, where I put all the candidates in one room and tell them that at the end of the day we want to win, but we also want the country to do better. That one strategy is actually to improve engagement with voters on policy. So what we did at that meeting, we brought experts, in education, health, governance, and they presented memos to, how much time do I have left? How much time? I'm sorry? 10 minutes? Okay, good. So let me show you, I don't know if I can play the video, but I'm not sure if it's going to be possible, but that's okay. If I can't, maybe during Q&A I can show you. So here is the meeting we run. And then a typical kind of campaign look like this. It's a lot of rallies and billboards and So what is interesting is that what we're proposing to the candidates costs 10 times cheaper than what they do otherwise. And we find, for instance, that what we find is that, for instance, town hall meeting leads people to participate at higher rate at the election. You can see that from this result. And then they tend to support the candidate at higher rate in those places. So, and this is what we did in the Philippines.